Hi, we're Team 3. I'm Jim, this is Hannah, Mengxing, and Laura, and we did the project Servant Leadership, which is learning to serve first.
Righty. This presentation is going to give the definition for servant leadership. We're going to learn some of the characteristics that servant leaders have. We're going to recognize where the method works really well, and then some of the issues that servant leaders come across, and then we'll apply some of the concepts that we've learned in class to servant leadership, and then answer any questions that you might have. Here's Laura.
So one thing to note about servant leadership is that it's very difficult to define. This is because the term itself is essentially a paradox. So servants accept duties and follow, while leaders engage in bold direction setting. Thus, the term servant leadership is considered to exist within the tension between altruism and egoism. Also, servant leadership touches on the emotional, relational, and moral components of leadership, so it's often compared to fatherhood. Consider most father figures. They serve, they lead, they self-sacrifice, they engage in direction setting. They also do a lot of the menial tasks, otherwise known as the dirty work. So changing the oil, taking out the garbage, mowing the lawn. These menial tasks are a huge component of servant leadership. And now Mengxing will discuss some of the other components as well.
So how to be the servant leader, and what is the way of the servant leader? Our research has led us to learn the main aspects of the leadership into 6 categories: humility, trust, communication, vision, empowerment, and integrity. So now let's welcome Jim start with humility.
Thank you, Mengxing. The first characteristic that we want to describe was humility, and that's the desire of a leader to serve first. Leadership becomes a byproduct of their passion to serve. As Greenleaf, the founder of servant leadership, stated, the servant leader is the servant first. It begins with the natural feeling that one wants to serve first. Then conscious choice brings one to aspire to lead. That person is sharply different from one who is the leader first. When we read the article Level 5 Leadership, Level 5 leaders blend the paradoxical combination of deep personal humility with intense professional will. It defies our assumption about what makes a great leader. Servant leaders have a tendency to think you and not me, and they're not afraid to do the dirty work, as Laura mentioned earlier. We also acknowledge empowerment as a characteristic of a servant leader, and that's power sharing within the organization. Servant leaders like to give a voice to followers, and they create a participative environment for employees to buy into. When we read the article in Class 7, New Surprises for CEOs, we saw that giving orders is becoming costly, and leadership begins sharing power and decision-making authority with lower-level employees and managers. The servant leadership model tends to fit this idea, and it helps move organizations into the future. Servant leaders are also encouraging, and they like to motivate their followers to be themselves, to embrace diversity, and to facilitate a culture of belonging. In building servant leaders, do they, while being served, become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, and more likely themselves to become servants? Is a question that all servant leaders need to ask. Another characteristic we acknowledge is trust. And employees always follow out of trust because they believe that the leader has their best intentions in mind, which is shown by their ability to serve. The more employees saw servant leadership at large in the company, the more trusting it became of their leaders and the organization as a whole. It helps develop a coalition of followers, and they end to follow on their own accord instead of a group that only follows with promises of rewards or threats of punishments. Now we're going to transfer over to Hannah, who will talk about communication.
Alrighty, thank you. That trust is formed in part because of communication. Servant leaders are in constant contact with their employees, that they take what they have seriously and apply it to the situations that may be involved. Servant leaders listen, withdraw, reorient, and return to engage, take care of situations, and help align it with the big picture for the company, but then they also break it back down into a way that the employees can understand what's going on, so they feel what's going on, so they can see how everything works together. Even though it will ultimately be the servant leader's decision, they like to get the employees involved because employees are the ones who is actually going to come down in business, is going to affect the most. When paired with the open communications and clear expectation of goals, the transparency of action comes together to create this trust that everybody will see in the field. As we have seen from our readings, Leadership is a Conversation by Groisberg. Conversation isn't just supposed to be meaningless company gossip. It's supposed to support and encourage employees while increasing performance. By applying the 4 I's, intimacy, interactivity, inclusion, and intentionality, employees actually feel that their input matters and is being recognized. They are viewed as valuable assets to the leaders and their company instead of just another tool that the company has. Vision and integrity come together. Everybody learns by just following along and learning from other people. That's why servant leadership is important within the aspects of a company, because by showing what's supposed to happen in a way, by showing what is supposed to happen, servant leaders can show how they're supposed to act without having a written rules and codes of conduct for people to follow. This makes more of an impact because nobody learns anything by just reading it. You have to see it applied in action for it to be used. Servant leadership is very effective because Fortune magazine put together a list of 100 best companies to work for, and 18 out of those 100, 18 of them practice servant leadership. We also, as discussed in class, level 5 leadership outperforms the market average by 7%. But as our research we have seen in our research, people who follow the 7 pillars of servant leadership actually outperform level 5 leaders by 6%. Thus, people who follow servant leadership are outperforming the market by 13%. And part of this reason is because there is an atmosphere of growth and participation that allows people to be more free and comfortable to do what they want to do in a servant leadership an atmosphere that is led by servant leadership, as opposed to one that is driven more out of fear and threat. It also prevails over financial rewards because people are doing it because they want to do it, not just because to get to the end that they want. And for more, there's Laura coming up.
So although servant leadership clearly has its benefits, it's equally important to be aware of some of the downfalls in order to overcome them. So the first is that a lot of people assume servant leadership is solely about being nice. And Chris Pyle, the owner of Donkey, counters that argument with his statement, "Anyone can be nice. The difference is how you live your life and what you value. Is the apparent niceness backed up with action?" Some of the nicest people are the cruelest businessmen and women. Servant leadership goes deeper than the shallow perception of being nice. It's also important for servant leaders to understand the limits of serving. It's vital for them to still maintain authority and not appear to get too relaxed or personal, appear to play favorites, or even people please. Sometimes saying no is just as empowering as saying yes. Another downfall of servant leadership is that it constantly challenges the ego. Servant leaders aren't worshipped for their accomplishments because they're too busy giving credit to their followers. However, with any 20-mile march effort, it is essential for the servant leaders to continue to serve and stay the pace, even when they're not appreciated. So the last challenge of servant leadership is that it goes against the grain of traditional business structure. So traditionally, managers are supposed to represent the interests of the top, not the lowly employees. Also, servant leadership isn't viewed as efficient as many traditional leadership styles. This is because listening and working through people's feelings takes time, and time is money. So for example, Donkey Coffee buys fair trade coffee in order to serve local coffee farmers. However, Chris, the owner, even admits that it would be much more efficient to buy cheaper coffee and more efficient to, and I quote, bark instead of listen to his employees. However, he also said that there may be efficient, but efficiency isn't what life is all about. So next we're going to talk about how we can apply some of these principles of servant leadership directly to the workplace. So first, when considering the values of servant leadership, it's vital to start from the top and promote a culture of servant leadership from the very beginning when establishing vision and mission. So these are some key phrases that we heard during some of our interviews about what is important in terms of a culture of servant leadership. These are also some key quotes that a lot of people mentioned during our interviews about the values of servant leadership. So you aren't going to last long just sitting at the top and directing those below. You need to engage. It's about leading from the heart, and we can do it right, so we should. Empowering subordinates is also a very important quality of servant leadership. So one aspect of this is allowing followers the freedom to act. This requires a very high degree of trust and a willingness to leave employees unsupervised. It also entails involving them and giving them a say in key business decisions. As the quote indicates, it's the employees who are the ones working their tail ends off, so they do obviously deserve a say in business choices. Automation Direct has a really awesome policy. It's called the Sandbox, and it really illustrates the concept of employee empowerment. So as long as employees are working within the confines of the sandbox, they're not considered to be at fault or making mistakes. So this really illustrates the way that servant leaders view error. This allows for a great deal of psychological safety and reduces fear of failure. Also, servant leaders are very aware of the difference between a bad decision and a bad outcome. Sometimes things are simply beyond human control. Additionally, servant leaders simply ask that their followers own up to their mistakes, and they promise to be held accountable to theirs as well. Oftentimes, servant leaders will actually apologize for mistakes that they made, and this can take employees off guard occasionally. Chris Finley at Automation Direct quoted this quote when describing why he chooses to view mistakes and empower employees in this way. He said, "I'd rather live this way. People smile when they see me coming, not scurry out of the way. I'm going to do right by them, and they aren't going to fear. They trust me and will go the extra mile to help me and each other out." Unfortunately, sometimes mistakes are so hefty or economic conditions are so poor that terminations are a must. However, servant leaders don't take the Donald Trump approach. They are in constant communication with their followers to ensure that there are no surprises and no yelling occurs in this process. Terminations are done out of love for the follower as well as other employees within the company. In fact, when we spoke to some of the businesses who go through the termination process, a lot of the employees that they had to let go actually returned to the institutions and the shops and the offices to visit and are in great graces with the leaders. However, it's obviously ideal to not have to terminate anyone, so one way to do this is to better develop your employees, and Meng-Ching is going to touch on that aspect of servant leadership next.
So, servant leaders go about simply offering traditional training and tools. They ensure there is an opportunity for followers to develop and create a culture of leadership. They also offer learning opportunities for not only the job tasks, but also relationships, conflict resolution, life skills. And for example, in the interview of the Automation Direct, they distribute character first notice to create a culture where people feel valued. Also, as the quote indicated at Wegmans, we care for our people so they can care for the customers. Servant leaders actually identify the reward system effective, since the followers follow out for just trust and respect. However, the servant leaders do reward their employees by recognizing their achievement. For example, at the Donkey, the owner often gives some bonus to the baristas for their exceptional latte art. And in Louis restaurant, nearly all the hardworking employees can get some snacks or the dinners, though it is not counted as their occasional incomes. Another interesting reward method that many servant leaders use is profit sharing. At both Donkey Coffee and the Automation Direct, the owners gave back the money to the employees, and by this way, nearly 20% of the profits are distributed. And to talk about the reprimand, most of the companies we looked into indicated the same approach. The culture of trust allows employees to be honest about their shortcomings and mistakes, so that the leader can probably give their feedback, and then the followers can develop and create a plan to prevent the detrimental failure. And as we mentioned about the manual work, do the servant leaders really do the manual works? The answer is yes. Most of them, they dust the dishes, stocks the cream, takes out the trash, and so they do this, they handle this kind of dirty work to save the time for the employees, so that the employees can totally focus on their jobs and they can do it better. Here are some attitudes from the interviewees. They said about how do they think about the dirty work. So for example, at Dunkin', the owners also do some jobs to help the baristas. Though he just wants to help him, he doesn't want to be a good barista. And at the Louis restaurant, the owner said, I also clean the bathroom. It is the employee's job though. This is my own restaurant. So let's talk about the personal connections then. So servant leadership makes running a company so much more than just the business. Servant leaders emphasize employee engagement, intimacy, just as we talked today in leadership is a conversation. And they spend some time with employees to some outside work. And in the Donkey Coffee, the owner sometimes screen for the employees. And also, most of the leaders, they caring about all the lives of the employees. For example, in the general meals, once an employee, he injured himself because he made some mistakes when he do the technical application of the new machine. Though it is totally his own mistakes, his own responsibilities, the leader visits him in the hospital and take care of him every weekend. So, servant leaders are more than just the bosses. They are resources to empower their followers. That's all about our presentation, and now, is there any questions?
Just the top button, right?